Okay, we started talking way back when. Let's see if I can jump back to that slide here. Should have started there. We started talking about CPUs, and we said there are four responsibilities. They find time. They allocate. I'm sorry. They schedule programs with the CPU. Remember, round robin and first come first serve. They find spots in memory. They find spots to be stored on hard drives. And lastly, they provide an interface. So what do I mean by interface? What do I mean? Well, how do we use a computer? Well, let's look at some old options first. Punch cards. That's an interface. There's two different ways. There's an output of punching the cards, but they also put the punch cards into the computer to be read. So it was a method of getting data into or out of a computer. The keyboard is a very common way. How do you type your score reports? School reports. You type them. Is that the only way? Well, there's a couple other options for you don't have to type. Let's get rid of that. Can't get rid of my Photoshop. Oh, it's not on your screen, so good. I had a little window pop up. I was hiding some of these. The mouse. The mouse and the keyboard are probably what you're most familiar with. I want you to know this phrase GUI, G-U-I. The GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. And one more time, let's return back to the olden days of my youth and even before when computers were very different. There were keyboards when I first started using a computer, but but Windows was not around, so therefore there were no mice. You did not use a mouse. You typed every command. If you wanted to run a game, you typed the name of the game. If you wanted to quit a program, you typed QUIT. There was no mouse. So be thankful that you can. So the GUI, let me go back to GUI. GUI is the graphical way of using a computer. The pointing, the clicking, the double clicking, the dragging, the dropping, icons, all those interfaces that we can use are examples of GUI interfaces. Nowadays, you have touchscreens. Could you imagine using your phone without being able to touch the screen? Go back about 15 years ago, and they had, um, well, they called them like palm, um, personal, what was the word they used? They're called PDAs, personal something assistants, personal data maybe assistant. And basically, you had like a stylus and you had to tap areas, or on, I think, the early Blackberry phones, you just had keyboards and arrow keys. So the touchscreen, even on laptops and tablets, have been a game changer. Um, I put out here the Kinect and the Wii. Think about how you can use your motion to send data in the computer. When you move your Wii interface up or Kinect or whatever, I think the switches are a newer option now. Then it will send data to the computer. That's an interface. All of these are working with the operating system. A lot of inputs. The outputs, well, you have printers, monitors, LCD screens, um, projectors, which are basically kind of like a monitor. Um, Not as many outputs as you do have ways of getting computer in, because mostly we're looking at visual images or we're reading something or we need to print something out. So you have, I didn't even mention, I think, and by the way, for your notes, be able to name one or two of each of these and you'll be fine for your notes. Scanners. So if you need to put a picture in the computer, you can scan it. I didn't mention that. Yours is being chopped off. I have at the bottom of my screen here, voice recognition. Do you talk to your phone now? Do you talk to your desktop with Siri or with Cortana, or your Amazon and Alexa? You can now use voice recognition. It's kind of was a futuristic. People back in the 60s and 70s thought that someday we'll just be talking to computers, but it was just a dream for the future. Now we're making orders and shopping and doing everything with just our voice. So any of these are inputs, voice recognition. I guess you could put output as well, Siri and speaker. I should have put speakers, sound, music, hearing. That's a huge output. What is doing all the work of making that happen? The operating system. The operating system is controlling the printer and the monitor and your touch interface, your mouse. All that is being run by the operating system. Um, Here are some images of some very old. I think this is that display scope from the Sage computer. One of the very first monitors to ever be built was, because back then everything was just printed out. So to see a picture was revolutionary for its day. Here's an old printer, probably in the late 50s. This is actually what a computer looked like when I was first using it. There was no mouse. There was no moving of no icons to click on. That was up and down arrows. Down, 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 enter. Left, 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 right. Look at the bottom of the screen. It would say dir, avail, branch, compare, delete, file spec. How would you operate that? You'd hit the letter that was brighter, that first letter. Again, it wasn't always the first letter, like execute was X. And that's how you operated it. So you didn't double click, you didn't speak to a computer, you typed commands. That was the only, well, I say one of the only way. They also had like joysticks. So you could, I don't think I ever had one back in this time frame, but think of like the old Ataris and Nintendos with gamepads and joysticks, but there was no mouse back then, at least not on Windows. Some other pictures, we had the mouse, we have tablets. I was actually using a tablet, not a tablet like you think of like with an iPad, but a drawing tablet to do all that binary work back then. We have joysticks. I'm not really familiar with the term spaceball, but I guess that's a controller that you grab the entire, like a ball there. The light pin actually was a device, you don't see this much anymore. You could actually touch the light pin to the screen, and so that was not a touch interface, it was detecting the light from the pen, not just the physical press. Oh, this was the old device I mentioned earlier, the Palm. You had a stylus and you just had to, so it was kind of an icon, but it was generally you had to use the stylus because your finger was just too crude to draw any kind of symbols. I think back then you couldn't even draw letters of the alphabet. It had a special way of drawing each letter of the alphabet in that little square there in order for it to be recognized. You could make up your own writing system. And lastly, I'm not going to make a new video because this is just some optional things. When I say optional, an operating system really should only provide those four things. If it can allow you to input data and output data and store data on the hard drive and RAM and schedule the CPU, it is a fully functioning operating system. But we tend to think of an operating system like your iOS as doing a whole lot more. For example, we just expect it to have sound. We expect it to get us to the internet. We expect it to maybe come with some games. We expect some basic functionality so that when you buy a computer, I mean, think about it. If you bought a computer that had no programs, you'd have to go out and buy a program. Now you can just get on the internet and browse websites and get on your banking and social media with just what's built into the operating system. So these are some optional things. What I mean by optional is you can be an operating system and not do all these things. So for example, servers that run websites, they generally do not do anything with games. They do not have sound capabilities. They do not have word processing. Their job is to store a file and then deliver that file across the network whenever it is requested. That's the end of its responsibility. So you can see the hard drive, the RAM, the CPU in that responsibility, but it does not get into sound and games and doing other things. So that's an operating system. If it can do those four functions, it is a full operating system. That's why I think in the previous video we mentioned about things like your gas pump at a gas station. If it takes input of a credit card, stores it, outputs a message on the screen, prints a receipt, it's an operating system. There's an operating system running that gas pump. It may not be Windows or Mac, but it is a operating system. So we just kind of in the modern era of Mac OS and iOS and Windows have expected your operating system. In fact, we put more weight on the extra things like the ability to get on the internet and play music and videos. Maybe you put more weight in the gestures of your Mac OS trackpad than its real core responsibilities. But these are some optional responsibilities of an operating system.